Hi, this is Carrie Morris, and this is a brief lecture on Chapter 3, Rhetorical Opportunities, in Gerard Hauser's Introduction to Rhetorical Theory. I don't, in these lectures, do excessive detail. I expect that you will have read these things. What I want to focus on are concepts and terms that you can pull out and use to analyze rhetorical events and rhetorical situations that will help you interpret and understand those situations better, give you something to write about and to think about. So Hauser talks about rhetorical situations as taking place in time and space, and he says that we have chronological and physical space where things take place, but things become rhetorical when they're transformed, or rhetoric transforms events into psychological time and social space. What that means for him are the two concepts of emergence and relativity. Emergence is the sense, and I think that this is a very important aspect of rhetoric that Hauser holds and that I do as well, is that it's a constantly moving, constantly ongoing thing. So it's emerging. So in terms of time, the thing that's important rhetorically is the meaning of an event across time, understanding that even our understanding of an event will change given enough time, and that these things do change. So we change our understanding of an event and its meaning to adapt to a dynamic and changing environment. So we can live in a society where slavery was considered a legitimate option by the Supreme Court. But because of emergence, that became something that we understand very, very differently now and see as a horrific time in our culture. So this is how rhetorical situations unfold. In addition, there's the concept of relativity. And I don't think you have to believe that truth is relative in order to understand rhetoric as being relative, in the sense that I would argue that there are spaces where we have belief, and then there are rhetorical spaces. And rhetorical spaces are spaces where meaning isn't stable. And in those spaces, to understand what's happening depends on the individual. So the meaning of the event is based on the perspective of everyone involved. If you've ever been in a car wreck, you'll know that people who see the wreck from the side of the road have one view, someone who's in the car behind has another view, the person who's been hit has another view, etc. Those perspectives, where we're standing, has a big impact. And in addition, these things are always changing. Again, getting back to emergence, but our perspective changes as well. As individuals, we don't stand still in terms of how we're understanding things. So I think that there is a real need to do interpretation of rhetorical situations in order to understand them. Rhetoric, I think from Hauser's view, takes a look at all these separate individual perspectives, and rhetoric is a path to provide social space and to have shared space. So we can't live constantly seeing the world, dramatically differently. We've got to come together and share certain views and beliefs, and we've talked about culture in this class, and we do this through rhetoric. It bridges the divides between individual perspectives. Now, another thing that Hauser talks about is Lloyd Bitzer's concept of a rhetorical situation. I want to stress that there are a lot of different understandings of these things, and it may be that Bitzer doesn't help you understand a rhetorical situation. It may be that Aristotle, doesn't help you, whatever. Just know that there are lots of different ways of looking at this. Okay, here's a big sentence that is Bitzer's definition of a rhetorical situation. It's a complex of persons, events, objects, and relations presenting an actual or potential exigence, which can be completely or partially removed if discourse introduced into the situation can so constrain human decision or action as to bring about the significant modification of the exigence. That, my friends, is academic writing. It's very turgid. So we need to go through and look at what's going on and what's important about Bitzer's definition. According to Bitzer, if a situation is rhetorical, it's not only that discourse can help resolve it, but that the situation demands discourse. Bitzer sees discourse and rhetorical discourse as the way we do business. And we have to have it in order to make things work. One characteristic of the rhetorical situation, and we might even phrase it a little bit differently, but which is to talk about rhetoric's character. One aspect of its character is that it's based on the concept of exigence, which Bitzer defines as an imperfection marked by urgency calls rhetoric into being. So an imperfection, a crisis, a disagreement, a need, some sort of problem which needs to be solved, which is urgently needed to be solved. It's all, not always, but frequently built around crisis. And this calls rhetoric into being, keeping in mind that rhetoric is something that is demanded in the situation. The purpose of rhetoric, or another aspect of the rhetorical situation is that it has to have an audience. But it can't just be anybody. That audience has to be interested in exigence and its resolution. So let's say the president announces that he's opening drilling in the Arctic, but he does this while he's visiting a kindergarten. Bitzer would consider that that's probably not a legitimate audience, because 5-year-olds aren't interested in exigence and its resolution. So the audience has to be relevant to what's being said. So events bring identities into existence, and we'll hear more about that in Chapter 4. An audience understands a situation and its power to act based on the way it is addressed and how it interacts with the discourse. This is a fascinating concept, which is the audience is not seen as this entity that the speaker goes and addresses and adapts himself or herself to. Rather, the rhetorical engagement has an effect on shaping the audience. So as speakers, we go in and give audiences clues to how we expect them to behave. So really the concept of audience in Bitzer is transactional. It has something to do with the message and the speaker, that these are interactions that are created. Bitzer's also interested in constraints, and constraints sounds negative. I think it always sounds like limitations, but it's limitations and opportunities. So if we take the kindergartners listening to President Obama talk about opening the Arctic to drilling, that's a limitation that he's speaking to an audience of 5-year-olds. That's not an audience that can engage with him rhetorically. So that's a limitation, that's a constraint. But the fact that the president delivers the message is an opportunity. People are going to listen to the president. He has power to do something. So that's a constraint on the situation. If I talked about opening the Arctic to drilling, no one cares. I'm not only limited, I'm going to be completely ignored because I don't bring with me the power to act in the way that he does. So they shape what an audience is ready to believe and the actions it is prepared to take. It doesn't have to be just the speaker. It can be any number of things, the conditions in the room, whether or not people are desperate or afraid, etc. And then finally, Bitzer has a concept of a fitting response, which are appropriate efforts to effect change. Now, the money in this view is right there, and that might be a very good way of phrasing a problem in a paper, which is to say, in this rhetorical situation, was the response fitting? Because we need to tap out exactly what we consider a fitting response. Well, I hope that you'll read this chapter carefully, listen to this lecture, and record questions so that we can talk about them in class. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.